everybody, Happy New Year and welcome to our first webinar of 2026. To be completely honest, I thought I'd done my last webinar about IDV, but there have been so many issues that I thought it would be a good idea just to share some of that information with you, because we're getting a lot of questions as well about some problems that people are facing. I am aware that for some reason the audio and visual is a little bit out of sync, so I'm sorry about that. I did try to fix it, but just bear with me. So just to let you know that today's session is being recorded, so if you'd like a copy of that, please let us know. Otherwise you can find it on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, because of the volume of people on the webinar, everybody's on mute, but there is a question box. So if you have any questions, please put your questions in there. We'll try and go through as many of those as we can at the end. But if we don't get to your question, I will reply to you directly. I deliberately haven't invited Companies House to today's webinar. I think that potentially some of the things and the issues that people want to raise, I thought it would be better that Companies House weren't on the call. However, I'm at a meeting on the 3rd of February with the new registrar of companies, and if you have any questions that you would particularly like me to take and put to the new registrar, then I'm happy to do that on the 3rd of February. And if you just want to put your question in the box for questions as well, maybe just start it with Companies House, and then I will take those questions and get answers to you after that date as well. Also happy to share the slides with you. There are some links on the slides as well, so please just let us know if you'd like a copy of the slides. So we will make a start. I'm just going to share my screen with you. So hopefully everybody can now see that. Again, the issues with sharing the slides on this format haven't been fixed. So rather than going through the slideshow, I'll just be showing you the slides in this format as well. So please bear with me with that, and we are trying to find a solution. We may go to an alternative provider later in this year as well. So identity verification, well, it's a struggle, isn't it? Let's face it. There have been so many issues since it was implemented on the 18th of November. Not with the IDV bit, but the submission of the codes, especially with the CSO01s. I've spoken to a lot of people about the issues, and to be honest with you, the issues have got to lie with Companies House. So for those of you that use software to submit to Companies House, the software providers weren't given any testing facilities, and information was changed last minute with Companies House, which meant that when people tried to submit documents, that they failed. Incorporations tended to work smoothly, but any forms or CSO1s, there have been major problems with, even with web filing in their own system. There were complications, so we will look at that. Some of those issues that there have been, some have been corrected now, but some, even in January, still of them, some of them are still outstanding. So we'll be looking at some of those today as well. So just to let you know what we'll be looking at, for those of you that haven't attended one of these webinars before, we'll be giving an overview of what IDV is, the different options for conducting identity verification. We'll look at the Companies House process, We'll look at what happens if people aren't compliant, the options for ACSPs, how to view a code once your clients obtain the code, filing requirements, and also issues that we've found as well. So to start off with identity verification, most of us have had to verify identities of our clients for many years through anti-money laundering regulations. IDV, identity verification with Companies House, is different. It's not the same rules. I've been speaking to a lot of people recently that have registered as an ACSP, and because they have a copy of the passport on file, they feel that that was enough to verify the identity of somebody if they've met them in person. This is not the case, and we'll be covering this later on in today's session. So, as we know, for many years, Companies House have incorporated companies, accepted appointments. They haven't had to verify anybody's identity, whereas people like yourselves and our company have had to go through those procedures under AML requirements. So there's a loophole, and it has meant that there's been a lot of fraud where people's identities have been stolen. Very much celebrities' identities have been stolen and companies set up in people's names that aren't genuine. So finally, Companies House have addressed this, and this was under the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act, which was implemented in October 2023, that some of you will know it's referred to as ECTA. So it's a different concept to the anti-money laundering regulations. IDV is just to confirm that it's a real person and their identity can be confirmed either through using apps like facial recognition or validated documents as well. It applies to directors, PSCs, members of LLPs as well, and it will also apply to those who file on behalf of others with Companies House, although the implementation of that part of it has been delayed. It also applies to new and existing companies, and it's with the existing companies that we see most of the burden here, because we've got to verify the identities of all directors and PSCs of existing companies, not just new incorporations or new appointments. So for incorporations now, we have to verify somebody's identity before we can incorporate the company. If they're an existing director or PSC of a company, if they've been verified already, then they can use the same code for multiple appointments. So the IDV is a one-off requirement, and once they've got that code, they can use that for their multiple appointments. For existing companies, mainly the code is supplied to Companies House when we file the CSO1. Not always the case. There are some slightly different rules in certain situations, and I'll be covering that later on as well. And I think that most people will agree that Companies House have made the rules very complicated about who has to file and when they have to file. Very frustrating. I think there was no consultation with people beforehand. They've just rolled this out. I think everybody would agree if they just made the whole filing requirement as part of the CSO1, things would have been a lot simpler, but there's different dates flying about for different requirements. I will go into a bit more detail in a moment about that, but I would say in the 25 years that I've been involved in this industry, this has been the worst implementation that I've seen. And Companies House have got to take responsibility for that. When I'm at my meeting on the 3rd of February, it'll be very interesting to see how they view this whole process has been. You know, are they patting themselves on the back about how well this has gone? So yeah, it will be interesting to see what their interpretation of this is, because I've not spoken to anybody that has felt that this has been straightforward at all. So first of all, the process for IDV, which is the first part that people need to do. There's two options. Somebody can go through IDV directly with Companies House, and we'll be looking at the different ways that they can do that. There are 3 different options for that, but it's a free service, so anybody can go onto that and conduct IDV. The second option is using an ACSP. So an ACSP is an authorised corporate service provider who are registered with Companies House, and we'll go through the requirements for being an ACSP as well. Sometimes people are trying with Companies House, and if they fail going through Companies House, then you can't try again. You have to find an ACSP that can provide that service for you. And an ACSP must keep any records of the verification procedure for 7 years and can be inspected as well at any point. So the 3 options with Companies House IDV is to use IDVT, which is the IDV technology, and that involves downloading an app. And then you will go through a process where you have facial recognition, whatever document you upload, so most commonly a passport, it will compare the likeness and it will check for fraud detection as well as part of that process. You also have an option to answer some security questions, and that's linked to a bank account, and I'll go into a bit more information on that in a moment. And also there's an option of, if you don't want to download the app, you can actually go to the post office and have your documents verified then. So with the IDVT, as I said, you start the process on Companies House website. You have to create a gov.uk one login account. People are having difficulty with that as well. It can be a bit complicated, and you must have a unique email address to be able to do that as well. But then you download the app onto a smartphone and complete the process. I tried that. It worked very smoothly for me. It took me probably about 10-15 minutes, but some people are having enormous problems. And I was in one situation where I had 2 people sat next to each other. One went through very quickly. The other person was sat there an hour later, still trying to complete the process. So it can be a very different journey for different people. So some people are preferring to use an ACSP because at least then there's an element of customer service and resolving problems, where with Companies House, if it doesn't go through, you're stuck. There's no customer service to help advise you on what to do in that situation. The second option of answering security questions sounds like an ideal solution. Again, you create your one login to be able to do that. It links to a UK bank account, and you'll be asked a series of questions. Now, the questions have multiple choice answers. But if you don't know the answers, then you will fail the test, and you have to find an alternative way of doing that. You can't skip a question, you can't ask for a different question. An example of a type of question would be, how much is outstanding on your mortgage? And you'll be given some brackets to choose between. If you don't know the answer to that, then you're going to be stuck. Another example would be, what is the upper credit limit on one of your credit cards? Again, if you don't know the answer to that, then you won't be able to use the security questions. The third option, which is the most favourable option, is being able to go to the post office to have your documents verified. Again, you have to start off with creating this gov.uk one login. You start the process on Companies House. You enter what identity document you're going to be using, and you can choose which post office. It will list different post offices that you can go to. I've put a link in there as well, so you can actually see the process on Companies House website, but this is where I've taken this information from. They've only recently put this on there as well to guide people through the process, which seems a bit late in the day as well that they've come up with this. There'll be an option to download a letter to take to the post office with you. You can keep that on the phone, you can print it out, you can request for it to be sent through the post, but that may shorten your window for being able to go to the post office because you'll need to wait for the letter to arrive. And as we all know, Royal Mail isn't completely reliable these days. Then your next step is to go to the post office. You take that letter. You must take original ID documents, not photocopies as well. And you must go within 15 days of the date that you've registered as well. You take your documents along, they'll verify them for you by using an app, which will do the fraud protection part of it. And then once you've completed that, you will receive an email with your code on it, and that will be sent to the email address that you created your one login for as well. And that takes probably within 24 hours, you should receive that code. So acceptable ID for the post office would be a biometric passport. That can be from any country. It doesn't need to be a UK passport. A UK photo driving licence, and then a UK biometric residence permit, residence card or frontier worker permit as well. You'll also need to take details of what your current address is and confirm the year that you moved in. If you've not been there for 12 months, you'll need to take information about previous addresses as well within a 12-month period. So people have started receiving letters if they haven't been compliant with registering their code with Companies House. You have a window of when you're supposed to submit your code to Companies House. In most cases, it relates to when the confirmation statement is due, but I will go over the differences in that in a moment. This time last year, Companies House said that they wouldn't be sending letters out to people that hadn't completed IDV when they were supposed to, especially if it was related to a CSO1, because there could be many reasons why somebody hasn't submitted the CSO1. However, they've obviously had a U-turn on that. As we know, the government are doing lots of U-turns these days. So there are 4 categories that will fall into non-compliance. So Companies House will inform people of their obligations. Then they will do what they call nudging and guiding. Now, nudging and guiding tends to be a threatening letter, threatening to prosecute people. So that's their nudging and guiding. However, that's what they've decided to do. They will deal with the non-compliance and address any fraud or criminality as well. So the enforcement action they can take is prosecution, referral to the insolvency service, and there can be financial penalties as well. As far as I'm aware, these are threats at this stage. It's going to cost Companies House an awful amount of money to go down the financial penalties route and also to prosecute people. So that will be in extreme circumstances. However, if your clients are worried, and we've had a few instances where clients have received letters and then forwarded them to you, all I can say is just ask them to complete their IDV, and then that will stop any further action from being taken at that point. So now moving on to who can be an ACSP. Anybody that is an ACSP has to conduct IDV at the same standard as Companies House, and there is guidance to what that standard is on Companies House website. You must be based in the UK, and you must be supervised under AML as well. And you must give your registration number to Companies House when you apply to be an ACSP, and they will check that you are genuinely registered as well before they will allow you to act as an ACSP. Companies House will also periodically check that you are still supervised as well, because that's really important, and they've tied that into who should be responsible people for being an ACSP. It is tied, although the regulations are different, it is tied to the anti-money laundering regulations as well. So if you're conducting IDV as an ACSP, you have a bit more flexibility than going through the Companies House process. You have two options again. You can use technology to conduct IDV, or you can do in-person checks. And again, I've put a link on the bottom of this slide, which talks about the standards that has to be met for those two different options. And there are certain requirements within that an ACSP must adhere to. So firstly, you need to take the full name of the person and any former names or any other names used for business purposes, and the date of birth, home address, address history for the last 12 months, and an email address. And it must be a unique email address. And we have a lot of situations where perhaps it's a husband and wife are directors of a company and they have a shared email address. Unfortunately, you can't use that same email address for both of those people. We have spoken to Companies House about that, and their response is you can register email addresses for free, so they don't see that as being a burden. So unfortunately, you can only use an email address once in this situation. As for the process of completing IDV, so for any directors, PSCs, members of LLPs as well. So first of all, you need to obtain the proof of identity and do the checks that they're a real person. Then the ACSP will access the Companies House web portal. If you have multiple people within your organisation who'll be conducting IDV, you need to give them authorisation as well. So they will need a gov.uk one login account, and then you can add them as administrators for IDV processes as well. The ACSP has to input the name, date of birth, address, and the verification information into the Companies House portal once they've gone through and verified a person. So if you're using a passport, you would add in that it's a passport and the passport number as well as part of the submission. And you also need to make a statement to say that you have carried out that verification procedure to the standard required. Once that's completed, it will be your end person that will then receive an email with their unique code. The code is not sent to the ACSP. Now, we've asked Companies House a number of occasions why the ACSP can't be given the code. They say it's a data protection issue. We've argued with them about that because we've just taken all the personal information on that person. So why can't we be given the code as well? But they're not interested in that argument. So the codes are only sent to the individual with that unique email address that they've provided you with. So if you're responsible for filing a document then, so the CSO1, you'll have to get the code back off that person before you can file the CSO1 for them. And that's where we see the most burden really on people like yourselves, because you've already had to ask your client to do this, and then you've got to ask them to get the code. And as we all know, we ask clients to do things and they don't do them, or the code's gone into their spam filters, and so it can be quite difficult of chasing up clients. But again, because there was no consultation, we couldn't put this to Companies House before they decided what the process was going to be. So unfortunately, we've just got to carry on and deal with this. And you know, it's unfortunate because it's a huge administrative burden on all of us to make sure that we get through this. But for these existing companies, hopefully, when we get to November this year, we'll have done everybody, and that will be an end to it, apart from new appointments and new companies as well. So you're given a little bit more leeway as to when you're using IDVT for identity verification when you're an ACSP. There's a few more options in that you can also accept national identity cards with biometric information on them for EU, Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein as well. And also for driving licenses, they can be UK, Channel Islands, Isle of Man, or EU, again, if they're biometric as well. So a few more options in there for you than with the Companies House system. The standards that everybody needs to meet, if you're using technology, it needs to check the security features of that document, which is why they need to be biometric, because that's how the app can read those features. And that's checking for fraud and it's checking for tampering as well. And the software within the app does that for you. The document must also contain the full name and date of birth of that person. That needs to be read by the app as well. And the app will also make sure that the selfie that's taken matches the photo on the document. If the passport's nearly 10 years old, sometimes we've seen that maybe some people haven't aged as well as others, and sometimes the software doesn't like and doesn't match those people. But as an ACSP, you can have eyes on that report afterwards, and if you can clearly see it's the same person, then that's the added value of having an ACSP. So it's not just the software that reads it, but you can add that element of customer service in there as well. And obviously the person needs to pass a liveness test as well, to make sure this is about fighting against AI and people using AI generated images rather than it being a real person. If you're an ACSP and you're doing in-person checks, the criteria is slightly different for these. Again, I've put a link on there. There are two groups, Group A and Group B. And you would need to take 2 documents from the person, either 2 from Group A or 1 from each group. And also, if the evidence is being checked by a person rather than the technology, then that person needs to be trained in detecting false documents with a specialist training provider. That bit's really important, and that's where you can't just go to a file and take out a photocopy of a passport that you took from somebody 5 years ago. you need to be able to validate that document. It's a reason why a lot of people have decided not to do in-person checks. We as a company have decided that we're not going to do that. We're just using the technology. But there are providers out there that have had this specialist training. If anybody needs to know any details of that, then I do have people that we can refer you to. But it does tend to be quite costly. I think we're looking in the region of about £150 to £200 for an in-person check. So if they can use the technology, that is the better way and the more cost-effective way of getting these checks done as well. You can also view a personal code, and you can link a personal code, which involves setting up a gov.uk one login. So if somebody's worried about, I might need this code in the future and it's on an email that I'm probably going to lose, that would be a safer way of storing the code. When you use the company's house system, the code is automatically saved in that one login account because you've created that before you could use the company's house system. If you've used an ACSP, then you would need to link that code. So you're going to have to create the code anyway. So that's up to your clients how they want to store that information, or you may be saving the codes for them in your systems, so you know that they're going to be securely kept as well. When a client does want to save their personal code, they'll create the one login account. They'll need to use the same email address that their code was sent to create that account. And then they'll log in, they'll confirm that they have had their identity verified, they'll enter the code, and they'll enter their date of birth as well. And then the code will be saved in that one login account for further use. So Companies House recently sent out some information to ACSPs, just things to remind them with some issues that have already been found. When you're using the portal for submitting information to Companies House for someone that you verified, it was found that if you're doing multiple people in one go, when you click to add a new person, it wasn't deleting the information of the previous person, which obviously is going to be a major problem, because then you'll be mixing up people's information and wrong codes being sent to wrong people. So Companies House advice is, when you've entered somebody, refresh your internet browser between each submission, and just make sure that everything has been removed before you start entering somebody else's details. Another thing is making sure that the client details that you've entered exactly match what's on the register, or if not, that you're saying that they could be known as a different name as well. If you've completed verification for somebody, and then you find out that there's a mistake in the information that's been sent, there's no actual process to rectify that. So you would need to contact Companies House and use the Inquiries At email address, and then they will be able to help you resolve that as well. Likewise, if you've mixed up somebody's information and the wrong code's been sent to the wrong email address, you can contact them and they should be able to sort that out for you behind the scenes. But there's no forms or anything like that, no official process to go through for correcting information once you've submitted it. So for IDV implementation, it went live on the 18th of November last year. Just in case you're not aware, this is currently out there and is compulsory now. So for new companies, any director or PSC, if they've not got any other companies, you'll have to have their identity verified before you can incorporate a company for them, or before appointing them to an existing company as well. For existing companies, if the person is a director and a PSC, then you submit the codes at the time of the confirmation statement. However, it's two different filings. So same person, so if it's me, I'm a director and a PSC of the company. My code goes on the CSO1 under director, but there's a separate filing that needs to be made at the same time for me as a PSC. So it's two filings, even though I'm the same person as director and PSC. Just to complicate that just one little bit more, as if there wasn't enough complication already, the window for the PSC requirement opens up the day after the due date of the confirmation statement, which means that if it was due today, my confirmation statement, and I'm the only director and PSC, I'd submit the confirmation statement today with my code as director, and then tomorrow I'd make my second submission for the PSC requirement with my code as well. Now, just to make life a little bit easier as a company, we've decided that our policy will now be that we will file confirmation statements the day after the due date, unless somebody insists that we file it on that date. That means we can make both of those filings, and then we won't forget to make that second filing. And I think that that will just simplify things for most people. But some clients will want it submitted on the actual day, even though you've got a 14-day window to file a CSO1. So that's up to you to make a judgment call on that. Also, if the person is just a PSC, so they're not appointed as a director of a company, then they don't file when the CSO1's due. Somebody, in their wisdom at Companies House, decided that they would file in the first 14 days of their month of birth. Now, I've spoken to people at Companies House about, I just needed to be able to give you a reason why this decision was made. I've been told the reason why. It still makes no sense to me. So the reason is that sometimes the PSCs may not be directly involved in the day-to-day activities of the company and may not know when the CSO1 is due to be filed. Therefore, they will know when their date of birth is, so we'll link it to that so it's at a time that they will remember. Honestly, we've had our head in our hands many a time over the last few months, because it just doesn't make any sense. I spoke to somebody quite senior at Companies House that said that there were heated words about this decision, but it was overridden by somebody higher up. I can only guess to who that may have been. This is the decision that was made, and this is the criteria now that we all have to work to. So we've got 3 different dates, as if life wasn't hard enough, that we need to remember. And most of the software doesn't give detailed reports of when these filings need to take place. So Companies House, on their website, it does tell you the dates that a director and a PSC needs to make their filings. You can't file early either. The window only opens for a standalone PSC in their month of birth. So you can't think, well, I'll just file it with the CSO1 anyway. You can't do that, unfortunately. But you can see the information on Companies House. Now, again, there in some situations, although you've got the same person as director and PSC, sometimes Companies House system behind the scenes doesn't think that's the same person. So they will put up 2 different dates. So that is definitely one to watch out for. And they can't change those dates either. So you're stuck with that. So I would say whatever it says on Companies House, just make sure that those are the dates that you file on. And if you are using software, hopefully there will be some reports that can guide you through that as well. So we've just talked about what the filing requirements and when that needs to be done, but it's on the slides there if you need to refer to that later on. So issues that we've found with Companies House, there have been many issues. Sometimes one of the main issues that we're having at the moment is that filing the CSO1, it's getting rejected, saying that the code, the IDV code for that person isn't valid, even though it's checked and we know that we've got the right code and that is the right person. They didn't know why these triggers were happening. Companies House advice is type it in manually, remove hyphens, make sure that it's in uppercase letters. Some more advice that they've given is make sure that the company data is aligned, make sure that there aren't any inaccurate details with dates of birth and things like that that could cause rejections. The bit that I've put in red is the bit that I wanted to highlight because it's the area that has caused me the most concern with advice that's come from Companies House. They have said if the problem persists, try submitting an application to get a new IDV code. I honestly have never heard anything so ridiculous. So you have a client, they completed IDV, you managed to get them through it a couple of months ago, you're now submitting the CSO1, it gets rejected saying that the code isn't right, and you have to ask them to do the whole IDV again. I just think that that's, and I'm not going to go into what my feelings are on that anymore at this point because I'm trying to be polite. I will be raising that on the 3rd of February. I don't think that that should be the advice. Somebody should only have to go through that process the once, and Companies House need to sort themselves out. Additional steps that they say may help, maybe clearing your cookies and your cache, or try using a different browser if you find yourself in that situation. We did receive an email yesterday. There is a fix that is being planned for implementation tomorrow. This fix is to cover a range of issues, apparently. Date of birth, mismatch rejections, which are correct. Directors with the same name and surname, but different middle names being rejected. So there's a few things that may be fixed tomorrow. To be honest, we're just going to have to wait and see whether that does fix some of the issues, but we will see. We're not holding out much hope with that, to be honest. As I said, there are issues where people sometimes have middle names that behind the scenes, Companies House have their two names as first name, whereas you're submitting it as first name and middle name, and that's causing some issues. So that should be part of the fix that comes out tomorrow. PSC verification, if the person didn't have a title like Mr. or Mrs., then that could be rejected as well. Some directors and PSCs showing a 14-day window related to the date of birth rather than the CSO1 date when it should have been the CSO1 date. Companies House have said that they're not going to fix that. We get a lot of problems with people saying they've not received their IDV codes. For ACSPs, we've asked in the portal, could there be an option to click on resend code, but there are no plans to implement that. So the only option that you have is to contact Companies House and ask them to resend the code. As we all know, it can take a few days for Companies House to respond to an email. And also there are a lot of letters sent out by Companies House that had the wrong filing dates on them for PSCs as well. When we contacted Companies House about that, they said that they have put out a note on social media to address that. Well, I never saw anything on social media. I follow Companies House and there was nothing out there. I think, honestly, Companies House are in a bit of a mess. I think they're really struggling still with this and the IT behind that. I know one of their senior IT people left at the end of last year, so you know that's going to put them in a worse situation. As far as we're concerned, all we can do is keep raising these issues and keep notifying you when we know that there are solutions. So we are constantly on the case for this, and if you have any problems, please feel free to contact us, and if we've had a similar problem, maybe we can help advise you as well. So also, so you know, when somebody has been verified, not when they've completed the IDV part, but when they've filed the form that connects their code to the company that they're appointed to, that shows up on Companies House Register. So it will show that their verification is complete, who did it, whether it was Companies House or an ACSP, the date that they were verified, and the details of that ACSP as well. That all shows up on the public register. So if you need to investigate somebody, then you have that information on there. So if you've not started IDV for your clients yet, when should you start it? Well, you need to start that immediately because there are so many complications. My advice would be get the codes as soon as you can. You might not need them till later in the year, but at least you've got them then and got people through that process. Make sure your clients are aware, get them to complete IDV, and just have them ready if you're filing the CSO1s for them. One other thing that I'd like to mention, there was a second stage being implemented for ACSPs. So the first stage was you had to be an ACSP to be able to conduct IDV. And then the second stage of you had to be an ACSP to file any documents with Companies House. And that was planned from spring this year. That has now been postponed. And at the moment, they've not released any dates of when they will implement that. So you don't need to worry about that, at least for now. So that brings you to the end of my presentation. Quite a lot to tell you about that. We have got some questions in the box, so I'm just going to go to some of those questions. So firstly, what are the implications if PSC due date is linked to the date of birth but should be linked to the CSO1? A Companies House accepting the fact that it won't be overdue until the CSO1 is in, or will they chase a PSC who has a date of birth in March but the CSO1 isn't due till the end of the year? The answer is they will chase the PSC, yes. They are fixed on the dates that they have recorded, even though we may feel that that's the wrong date, they won't be changing them. So my advice would be get that person IDV'd, get them to submit the code for the PSC part in March that's linked to their date of birth, and then submit it for their director status later in the year when the CSO1 is due. I have another question here. Does the postponement also mean that Companies House will keep web filing open for accounts filing? As far as I'm aware, accounts filing is going to software only filing. I'm not sure on the exact date for that because that has been postponed a few times, but I will raise that on the 3rd of February and see if we have a fixed date for that. I know there were some problems because of all the different types of accounts that can be filed for charities and different disclosures that need to be made. But as far as I'm aware, they will be closing web filing for accounts filing at that point, and that includes dormant accounts as well. Where do we go? Does the PSC verification have to be done every year or just the first year? IDV is a one-off requirement. So once it's been submitted to Companies House, that's it. It doesn't need to be done again. So from then on, it'll just be for new appointments or new incorporations. So it's not an annual thing that you have to submit. So we've had that one already. We've had to file a correction through this. Only problem is we filed a correction on the 10th of December and it hasn't been accepted yet. They said they have a big backlog of corrections and won't give any time scales. I'm really sorry that you're in that situation. It sounds like there's nothing that can be done. If you want to contact me and let me know what kind of correction you were looking at, then maybe we may know some people that might be able to push that through a little bit quicker. But I think Companies House are drowning, and I'm sure that they will get there eventually. It's up to you whether you want to wait or if we can see if we can push that through for you. I will take one last question because we're nearly at the end of our time. Somebody's saying, is it mandatory for IDV person to save their personal code? No, it's not. It's just an option so that you've got because when it's done through an ACSP, it'll be very easy to lose that email. I think I know I would. So it's just an option, or advise your clients to save them somewhere securely that can be obtained if they're going to need that in the future. So I'm going to stop taking any questions. I'm sorry if I've not answered your question, but we do have them, and I will get a report of any questions that are kept there. And I will contact you directly and answer your questions. I hope today's been useful for you. I'm sorry that we're having to go through all of this turmoil with IDV. I do believe that they could have made it so much easier, but we've just got to plough on and get it all done, I'm afraid. There isn't an alternative to that. So thank you for attending today, and we will let you know our next webinars next month. It's another one by Liz Marsden. It's the third in her 3 that she was doing. So we'll be sending something out next week about that. Thank you everyone for attending, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.